Hey guys, it's Maymay, and it's time to have that discussion. What are the differences in inks? I get this question all the time, and I've been meaning to do a video directly about inks for a very long time. One of the reasons I shy away from it is because I have discovered that people are very polarized where inks are concerned. Some people believe that inks do a certain thing, and some people believe they do another thing. So here's what I'm going to do. First off, I'm going to disclose that I'm no expert. I'm just a stamper like you guys, and these are the products I use. So what I'm going to do is tell you how I use them and why, and then you can go with that when you're making your decisions, and you can listen to what other people have to say about inks. And for the most part, I'm going to agree with people about inks, but there may be a time that I feel differently about an ink than someone else might, but I just want to do that disclosure. And again, I've said this 1,000 times. There are no hard and fast rules in crafting. There are some rules where inks are concerned if you want to get better results, but to be honest, I still say use what you got. So look at this pile of inks, and this is not even all we're going to talk about, but this is most of them. So let me move this pile. I just wanted you to have something to look at. What we're going to do, I'm basically looking at every ink that we carry in our store, and I'm going to give you a rundown of what that ink does, and in my opinion, how I use it. And remember, my opinion, I'm not trying to spark debate. I don't think it will. I'm just like heading it off because this is my opinion. So for our first ink demo today, we're going to look at these two inks. These are my two go-to inks. These are the ones that I've been using pretty much as long as I've been stamping. Actually, this guy was my first ink, and I used him for years before I graduated into the VersaFine. Now, the first big difference in these two is this is a pigment ink and this is a dye ink, okay? This ink is going to stay wet longer. This one's going to dry faster. That's your first difference, all right? The next difference is this guy is going to move if you use an alcohol marker on it, something like a Spectrum Noir, okay? If it's an alcohol-based marker, it will move the VersaFine ink. This guy will not move with your alcohol-based markers. It will sit still. Interestingly enough, neither of these tend to move with water. I'm going to show you that in just a second. They both sit still. Now, the first thing I want to encourage you to do when you're shopping for inks is read the back. This will give you totally the information you need when you're thinking, I want an ink to use with alcohol markers or I want an ink to use with watercolor. Always read the back. This one says brings out the finest detail, longest lasting pigment ink pad available, perfect for using watercolors to color stamped images. So there's that one. This one says quickly dries on most papers. When dry, stamped impressions are water resistant, dries on all paper surfaces, including coated and textured papers. So it helps you by reading the back to know what you're looking for. Now, as far as properties of these two inks are concerned, in my opinion, this guy right here gives you a much finer, richer, and crisper image, especially for bold stamps. We're going to stamp it in just a second. If you have a stamp with a bold image or something that has a lot of surface, you're going to get a really better chance of getting a good, clear image with your VersaFine. This guy's going to do a decent job, but sometimes it can puddle on a stamp, even a photopolymer stamp. Photopolymer, silicone, sometimes it can. It's not as bad on photopolymer. Okay, so let's stamp these guys down. So I got a little scrap piece of paper. Got a stamp here. This is Merry Christmas. You can tell what I'm working on. All right, so I'm going to put some VersaFine on. And I'm going to bring this up because I want you to see how that ink sits on that stamp. Can you see that? I'm even going to flip it over so you can look through it with me. You see how rich that is? And now let's stamp it. I don't want to hang out too long. I don't want it to dry, but it wouldn't. Now look how pretty that is. Nice and crisp and beautiful. Now then, I'm going to clean this. I'm just using my squeaky clean scrubber. Got some squeaky clean on there. I'm going to rub it off down here. I clean on one side and then I kind of rub off on the other. And because this is going to have some squeaky clean on it and we want to do a fair test, I'm going to use another piece of paper to do a stamp off to get any of the squeaky clean off so that that's not contaminating our ink. So that's good and clean. All right, so let's close this one up. Bring our paper back. Memento. This one. Now notice this is a bigger stamp, so I'm bringing the ink pad to the stamp instead of the stamp to the ink pad. I get a better result with that. All right, I'm going to bring this up and show you. Can you see how different that is? We'll flip it over. Can you see it's not as rich and you can kind of see the paper through it? Now let's stamp it. It kind of puddled on that stamp. just a little, but sometimes it'll even out, you know, as it goes, it'll kind of even out, or either my eye just goes, well, that doesn't look as bad as I thought. So look at these two. In real life, I don't know if this is translating on camera, but this one almost has a charcoal color, or this one has a black color. There is a slight difference. I could look at these, and I think anybody who came into my craft room could tell that these are two different inks. Now, they probably couldn't tell which inks, but they could tell they're two different inks. They do look different. Now, is this going to stop me from using either of these? No, I'm going to use them all the time. I still use them all the time. Depends on where I want to use them or what application. Let's look at water. So first I'm going to write which one is which. So this one is Versa. This one is Memento. I better put fine on here because we're going to look at another Versa ink in a minute. Okay. Water brush. Make sure that it's flowing. Get a good bit of water there. Okay. And now I'm going to come to this side and hit this side with a good bit of water. And notice that that ink is not moving at all. It's sitting still, okay? Now I'm going to come to this side with water, and you're going to see that it won't move either. I have had, and I think it depends on the paper, but I have had times where after a while, the ink, the Memento ink will kind of bloom under the water. Not terrible, but just a little bit, or just kind of spread just a little bit, but it's really locked in well here on this paper, which this is Nina paper. It's doing really well. So, interestingly, you can use both of these inks for your watercolor. Now let's look at alcohol markers. This is a Spectra Noir, and I chose a light color. Let me show you the color. I chose a light color so you'll be able to see through it whenever we go to smear over these guys. And I'm going to use the chisel end so we can get a good go at it. All right, so here we go. On to this one. This is your VersaFine ink with alcohol marker. Now I'm going to bring this up and show you that smears. You see the smear, and you see how my color is kind of contaminated? That is what alcohol does to VersaFine. Let me clean this marker off so we don't contaminate it. Okay, now let's go to the Memento side and see what we get. That ink does not move. It sat still. See the difference? Big difference. So when I'm using alcohol markers, I stay away from using VersaFine ink for my images. Even though you can be super careful and kind of get in there and pat the ink and not move it so much, after a while, it'll kind of bloom. Like I was telling you about that. It'll kind of smear out a little bit. So I don't use alcohol with VersaFine. So I'm hoping that'll clear that up for you guys. But I still recommend having both of these in your stash. I think they're awesome and they both have a place. Okay? The other thing about VersaFine, you can, and I'll show you this because I want you to see all of this today. Let me find a powder. Here we go. So this is a clear embossing powder. I want to show you. I'm not actually going to emboss, but I'm going to show you how this works. You can, because this is a pigment ink that stays wet longer, you can emboss it. Now, why would you want to emboss a black ink? If you wanted a shiny black ink and you didn't have a black embossing powder, you could do it this way. So that's wet. I'm going to work fairly quickly because this will dry, but I can lay this down on top of that. And I need to put a piece of paper under to catch. Where'd my scrap go? Here we are. Okay. Pick this guy up without flicking it everywhere. Put this like this. And I'm going to bring this to the camera so you can see that has stuck. Can you see it? I'm going to move it around so you'll really be able to see that it's stuck. See that? It's on my finger. It will emboss, which is awesome. So you can use your clear embossing, you can use color embossing, whatever you want on top of that. So that's a cool thing too about VersaFine. Now, while we're talking about embossing, let's go ahead and look at Versamark. Okay. So VersaFine is a color. Okay. Versamark is your watermark stamp pad. This is created to use with embossing powders, just like I just showed you, okay? This one, however, is clear. So what this one will do is if you want to use a black embossing powder, you can get a black image using this one pad. It is not made for everyday stamping. However, there are some cool techniques you can do with this clear ink. My ink pad is filthy, but there are some cool things you can do. You can do resists. You can do tone-on-tone stamping, which is beautiful. You can do different techniques with this, and they're all over YouTube. There's all kinds of things for this. But that lets me show you the difference between Versafine and Versamark. This is just a clear stamp that will hold embossing for you to heat it. That's a whole other video, heat embossing. But that's what this one is. And we carry this in our store in 2 sizes. So you can invest in the bigger one, or you can get this little 1-inch guy. If you're not a very active heat embosser, maybe this little 1-inch guy will work for you. I happen to love this pad. I think it's great to have. So that's Versamark. We can put that one aside. That one's simple. Okay. While we're talking about Versafine, Versafine comes in colors, which is awesome. I love the colors of the Versafine ink, and it reacts the very same way that the black does. This is actually just a color in a larger pad, just like these. These are just smaller pads. So for example, this is the 1-inch Onyx Black that we just played with. My very favorite ink of all time, colored ink of all time, is this one. Habanero. It's the most beautiful color. I will show you what I do with my little sheet. I threw it away, didn't I? Because I got it dirty. Let's do it right here. Of all colors, of all inks, this is my favorite. It's stunning. Do you see how bright and orange that is? Love this ink. Now, the cool thing about these colored Versafine inks is that they react just like this solid black ink. You're going to get a crisp, beautiful, rich color from them. Beautiful. Okay, I love these, and I love that they fit in the Tim Holtz little tin, and I can store them just like this. Even though this is a big pad of that little guy, I still have both because I love them. Okay, so that's Versafine. Now, not to be outdone, Memento also has smaller sized options in lots of colors. Hold on just a second. I'm going to show you my collection of Mementos. These are some of my favorite inks, mostly because of the shape of the pad. I think this, let me zoom out here so you can see all of these. This is one container that I have, and I have about 5 more in another container. But the shape of this pad is so fun. I've done so many videos showing you ways to use this pad. It is super cool. Now, the same properties exist in these that exist in this guy. So if you want to stamp in color and then watercolor or alcohol marker in color, this is your option. Look at all these colors. There's so many. We carry them in 3 different sets. We have them in I think it's a 12 pack of 3 different sets. I'll be sure to link all these inks below from the store so you'll be able to get to them. But these are awesome. And what I love, again, is the shape of this ink pad. And there's so many videos on my channel you can check out about this, but just for kicks and giggles, watch. I love this pad because if you wanted to make like a flower, you could totally ink pad to paper and throw a flower down so fast. I love the shape of these pads. Matter of fact, I did a poinsettia. It was so pretty. So go check those out on the channel. I'll link them below. So, Memento and Versafine, black and color. Super cool. I think we've explained those pretty well. Now then, for probably the most controversial ink, and the reason I say this is controversial is because I hear from you guys a lot about this ink, a lot about it. Most people, and I was one of them, believed that if you had this ink, it was all you needed because it stays on, right? The name is perfect for this product, but we believe that it stays on everywhere and it won't move. That's not necessarily the case. Now, here's the thing about StaysOn ink. I'm fixing to do something that is against my will, but I'm going to do it. It stays on, but it is invented for non-porous surfaces. That's what its plan was, okay? So that means it's also going to stain your stamps. So where I can get these pretty clean using my other inks, once I use the StaysOn, it's probably not going to get clear ever again. I'm okay with that because a stained stamp is a loved stamp. I'm okay with it. It doesn't change the stamping of the actual stamp itself. It just will be dark because I've used StaysOn on it before. But let's read the back real quick. Designed especially for use on plastic, metal, glass, ceramic, laminated paper, coated paper, and leather. Not recommended for fabric. Although I've seen people use it on fabric and they have good results, but do your own test at home if you plan to. This is a solvent ink. So we've seen pigment, we've seen dye, and now we're looking at solvent. This ink smells of almonds. I think it does. I think it smells like almonds, like almond extract, and I love the smell of this ink. Everybody laughs at me because I always want to smell it. So we're going to ink this dude up again, and actually, let me stamp it on paper, and then I'm going to stamp it on a piece of acetate. It's beautiful. And what I'm going to do really fast is go ahead and clean this and see if I can keep some of the staining away. Put that on there for a second. I probably won't be able to get all of it, but if I go ahead and use my squeaky clean right away, I can usually knock it back a good bit. Not bad. Still a little discoloring, but not bad. Okay, let's stamp it on. Well, let's play with this one first, and then we'll stamp it on some acetate. Now, this little piece that comes with it, I always keep that, and it says do not discard. It's perfect for keeping your stamp pad from drying out. Let's look at it with water. Okay, StaysOn on paper, water marker, water brush, I should say. We'll do half of it. And it's not moving 100%. I'm going to bring this up because I want you guys to see that there is some discoloration on the paper. I don't know if you can see it very well. Let me see. Right on this edge, how close can I get that? There's a little bit of discoloration. It did move a little bit, okay? Let's look at it with this alcohol marker. It moves. I'll show you. I have a theory, which I could be wrong. I don't really do science. But I have a theory. It's because this is probably a strong alcohol product, and alcohol probably moves alcohol. It's a theory. Someone who has a science degree can explain that, because I don't. So I do not use this for anything. I don't use this product for anything except stamping onto non-porous surfaces. Let me get some acetate. So this is a piece of acetate. Sorry about the flower on this page. We're just going to play with this. I'm just putting this here so you can see. You can see I've got this clear. There's nothing on it. It's clear. All right. And I'm going to stamp on it with the StaysOn and show you what it does. Okay. I love the smell of this ink. I'm going to say that a couple times because I love it. It smells so good. All right. So if I stamp this here in this top corner. Ooh. I forgot about the smear. I should have done the smear test. It does move because it's plastic. You need to be super careful. Let's do it again. And let me be more gentle. I haven't done this in so long that I forgot because I don't use this ink very often. And I'm going to sit this down on here nice and easy. Press it into place. Try to keep it clean. Where I love to use this ink is on making coasters when you buy the tiles like from Office Depot or Home Depot or Lowe's. I love to make coasters out of this ink. Okay. Let me clean this guy just to try to keep some of my staining down. It's pretty stained now. I'll show you. Pretty stained. It's okay. It's still going to work. It's no big deal. All right. So let's look at these guys up close. So this is stamped on acetate. Okay. This image is not 100% perfect. It moved. I have a juicy StaysOn pad. That's the one that I did terrible. I wiggled that one. Now I have to let this dry. I'm going to show you. Put this back on the white paper so you can see. I'm going to show you how long this takes to dry. Let me find something to smear it with. I don't want to run my finger through it. Let's use this eraser. Okay, so if I go up here right now, see how it's moving? How it's made that line through it? I could see that? So it's not dry. So we're going to let this dry and come back to it in a few minutes. We're going to test this one in a second. Now you can heat set these. You can hit it with the heat tool if you need to go faster. But for me, I find sometimes that can warp my acetate or whatever I'm using. So I'm just going to sit this aside and let it dry. And you and I will look at it in a few minutes. That is what StaysOn is for. So please don't be confused by this one. So many of you tell me StaysOn ruins my stamps. It doesn't ruin them, but it does definitely stain them. And it's really not for paper crafting at all. It was, except maybe if you have a laminated paper or something like that, something that's really a sleek surface, you can use this for that. But really, this is something I use for more DIY projects. Now for some super fun. Let's talk distress ink. Now, distress ink should not distress you, actually. It should just be fun. You should enjoy it. And it is a super fun product because it'll do a lot of things. So the original distress ink was this guy right here. This is distress ink. This color's vintage photo. It is acid-free. You can create age looks on papers, fibers, photos, and more. Let's flip it over. This is my little pad that we'll be using in a second. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and put it on. Okay, this one says, distress inks are acid-free, fade-resistant, dye ink. So we've seen a dye ink before. Remember? We looked at those a while ago. It tells you can age photos with it. You can distress paper. And the cool thing about this is it says, spray with water and let dry. You can move this with water, okay? It also, these have re-inkers that you can re-ink these guys. This vintage photo is one that I keep in my stash. I love this one. I bought the big pad of it because I use it so much. And I have the minis in like every other color. I have so many of these because I love them. And I have so many videos showing you how to use these guys. I'll link those below too. My dragging technique, or the dragging, not mine. The dragging technique that's done with these is super fun. Okay. This is Distress Oxide ink, and right off the bat, I want to read the difference. Here's my little ink pad. By the way, that's put on with a little Velcro dot. I'll show you what these look like. I picked these up at Walmart, and I cut them in half, and they're like pre-sticky. So I just put them on the back of these guys and stick my little pads on there so I can reuse them. This is a water-reactive dye and pigment ink fusion. So what is this saying to you? We've seen a pigment ink, we've seen a dye ink, and now we're fusing them together. That creates an oxidized effect when sprayed with water. Use with stamps, stencils, or direct to surface. Blend using ink blending tools and foam. Re-ink with Distress Oxide inkers. So what we've got here is a mixture of the two inks we looked at earlier, the pigment and the dye ink. It's super cool, and they, as much as they react different, they also react the same, but you get a different look. So let's stamp these guys down. Actually, I'm just going to do pad to paper with these. So this one is Vintage Photo, and I'm just going to wiggle it on my page to get some color out. You can see how that one looks. This is regular Distress ink, not Oxide. And then this one, I'm going to wiggle on the page. I probably could have picked a better color because this is not the prettiest color for this sort of technique. So I'm going to bring these up to the camera, and I want you to notice that Distress ink is actually a little darker, kind of a more specific pigment. It's a real brown, a true brown. This guy is a little softer. It almost has a dusty cast to it. It almost feels like a powder, although it's not. It's really interesting. Now I'm going to show you what they do with an ink blending tool. So I'm going to cover this guy up. This is regular Distress ink. And with the blending tool, we can rub that around, and you can see how it moves around just like that. That's with your blending tool. And that's the standard Distress ink. Now let's look at Oxide with the blending tool. Whoops. And I do have separate pads for Oxide and Distress. I do think that matters. It may not, but in my mind it matters. This one, I can get a much darker blend, a much richer blend. Do you see how much smoother that is and how much less effort it took? This one I really had to work. This one was so much less effort. It's really pretty. They move like, well, they move like pigment because they stay a little wetter, if that makes sense. So, all right, move these guys aside. Let's do the water deal. Okay, so this is my water brush. I'm going to come to this side, and I'm going to smear this around and show you that it moves. And why would you want it to move? Well, there's a lot of techniques you can do with these inks because you can move them around with the water. And they even move like this, okay? So I'm going to clean that brush, and let's go over here. Watch how this one does. I'm gonna get my brush good and wet. Look at that. This one almost turns into like paint. See the difference? That pigment really moves. This will move, but this pigment really reacts to the water. Also, when it dries, it'll have that kind of powdery coat to it, that oxide feel. Really pretty. Now, just for kicks and giggles, let me show you what alcohol does to it. I've always thought this was interesting. That alcohol barely moved that Distress ink. I mean, barely. It did a little bit, but not much. Let's look at the Oxide. I'm probably missing my marker at worse than the ink. It does move somewhat. It changes the color of the marker a little bit. You can tell that. It's not the worst. I've actually used alcohol marker with Distress ink before and not been sad about the results. So that is Distress and Distress Oxide. I'm going to bring this up and let you see what I mean by that kind of powdery cast. You see that? That is not the best color for this demo. But you can see it leaves this, it almost looks like you can rub it off. It's really interesting. Now, people have asked me, but if this moves with water, does it ever dry permanent? It actually does over time because I had a technique I wanted to use. I thought it would be really cool. Well, because this dries and I can't move it later with water, my technique didn't work. So, because someone asked me, if I mail this on a card to someone and it rains, is it going to smear? No, it will be fine because it does eventually dry down permanent. Not permanent, because you probably could move it if you tried, but it dries down dry enough. Okay, so that is Distress ink and Oxide. Now, the Oxides come in these beautiful colors, same colors that the Distress come in, but the difference is these are so much more vibrant. just beautiful. And they're a different ink. They do, you know, they give you a different result. Now for another wrench in our ink get along. These are hybrid inks. This is by Nouveau. This is a fast drying ink, which basically has the properties of pretty much everything I just showed you. It has the properties of pigment, it has the property of dye, and it also has the property of the solvent, the StaysOn, because this one claims you can also stamp it on clear, on non-porous surfaces. Now, there are several inks out there like this. I'm pretty sure, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Brutus Monroe ink works a lot like this, where you can use, I know you can use it on all surfaces, but I don't know if it's called a hybrid. His is called a surface ink. I don't know, I'm not sure the detail on that, but I just wanted to point that out, that there are other inks that do like these, not just the Nouveau, but these are the ones we carry in the store. One reason is because I really like the color selection. I like that these came in options. So there's a whole bunch of them. Let me show you real quick. I'm showing you all the other colors. I might as well show you these too, right? So these guys, I liked that I could get this color selection. I liked the way they stacked and were so easy to keep up with. And other ones do the same thing. I just kind of grabbed these because I thought they were cool. So let's go to the black one and let's do some stamping and testing. Now, because this is a surface, a hybrid ink, because this is a little bit of everything, it's also going to stain your stamps, okay? So I'm going to stamp this down and show you how this looks. This is the black. This one's called Black Shadow. It stamps really, to me, it looks a lot like the Memento. It has that same kind of almost charcoal feel. So almost like, it's not nearly as solid as the Versafine. I think the Versafine is much crisper. We clean this off. This stamp's getting its use today. All right, let's look at this one with water. And let me write what this one is. Nouveau Hybrid. And let's see what water does to it. So it should be dry now because it is a fast drying. I don't know if there's any water on that brush. Didn't feel like it. Let's do it again. Okay, the paper's peeling, but the ink is not moving. Let me bring that up to you guys. So the ink sat still for that. So let's see what happens with an alcohol marker in this ink. This is the hybrid, and it did not move, not a single bit. So see, that's a cool thing too, because if you're okay with the amount of ink you get or the look you get from this guy, then it's kind of having one ink in your arsenal. Let's see what it does on acetate. I don't remember ever testing this one on acetate. Matter of fact, while we've got this over here, let's look what our StaysOn did. So here it is. Let's bring that eraser over. I don't know if it's going to be dry yet. Let's just see. It's still not dry. That's better though. It didn't smear quite as easy as this side did. So that was better. And look right there. That bottom part is totally dry. See that it's not smearing at all. It could be that I'm using an eraser. It's still smearing a little bit, but not bad. And it's on there, right? So this side is still a little juicy. I can feel it. All right, let's stamp this guy on some acetate and see what it does. I didn't read the back. I needed to read the back. Let me stamp this and then we'll read the back of the ink pad. I do like the way this ink coats the stamp, but look what it does. It's kind of pale there. All right, let me do this again. And you know what I'll do? I'm going to stamp off and make sure there's no squeaky clean left on my stamp. And I'm going to try it again clean. Let's see if we get a better result. Holding my breath because I'm trying not to wiggle it. Not the greatest. So for me, StaysOn is the one I would use for the clear, for acetate. I think it just looks better. And I've always leaned to that one. So you can see there why you really need multiple inks, right? Because even though this one says it can do all, I'm not real happy with how that looks on the acetate. Let's look at this. Use Nouveau Hybrid inks for stamping. Ideal to use with water-based and alcohol pens. Apply ink to a stamp and use on a card or heat set on glossy surfaces and fabrics. These permanent fast-drying inks are waterproof and smudge-proof, ideal for coloring. So it does say glossy surface. It did not say acetate, so maybe I pushed the envelope on that one, but I feel like this is a glossy surface. So, wow, we looked at a lot of inks. The only thing I didn't go into detail on are like other pigment color inks, but pigment kind of reacts like pigment. We looked at that with the Versafine. You're going to get the same kind of result. Hey, thanks so much for watching today, guys. I hope this was informative. I hope you learned something from it. And I'll be sure to leave links for all of this, plus the videos I mentioned as I was going through. Thanks so much for joining me on my channel. Be sure to click subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. Share it with your stamping friends. Maybe it can answer some questions for them as well. Have a great weekend. Talk to you again real soon. Bye-bye.